Welcome to the Health Coach OT. I'm Dr. Jaclyn Schwartz, occupational therapist, scientist, and board certified health coach. If you're a therapist ready to expand beyond traditional interventions, you are in the right place. This is where we explore evidence based coaching techniques that address the root causes of chronic disease, from nutrition and stress to lifestyle factors that truly drive lasting client outcomes. Today, we're diving into early intervention and family coaching with Katie from Hello Joy OT. We'll explore how occupational therapists can use coaching techniques like motivational interviewing to empower families and create lasting change in natural environments. Katie shares powerful stories about connecting with families, and we discuss the challenges and rewards of this family-centered approach. Let's get started. So, Katie, can you start by telling our listeners about your background and how you found your way into early intervention?
Yes. So occupational therapy is a second career for me, and I would love to tell you that my whole life I'd always wanted to be an OT, but that just wasn't the case. So a longer story, but I had another career that I needed to shift from, and I had a friend that told me I'd make a good pediatric OT. And so I landed in OT school, and that's what happened. One of my field works was at a children's hospital, because originally I had thought I wanted to work with older children in like an outpatient clinic setting, but this particular provider had a lot of experience in the NICU, and she was in the outpatient setting, but she was getting mostly babies. And then I paired that with another fieldwork supervisor who was doing home health. And so I got some experience doing both with children. And so when I got to a point where I was ready to look for jobs, early intervention seemed to make the most sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like you like EI because it's like a good mix of peds, but also still all the benefits of home health.
Yeah, definitely. I love working with people in their natural environment. I liked it a lot better than being in the clinic, I felt. For me, it was more back to back than what I liked. I like having a little bit of downtime between visits.
Yeah, it is nice to have a moment to reset in between people. So for people who aren't as familiar with early intervention, can you describe just like what a typical day or week looks like for you as a EI OT?
Yeah, for sure. Just like nuts and bolts of it. It's different than going into a clinic, looking at your schedule, and kind of having these visits that you know prepare for and then clean up afterward and go get another kiddo. In early intervention, we are meeting people mostly in their homes. Sometimes we'll do daycare visits, and occasionally we'll also do like a community visit, like a library or something like that. But generally speaking, my week looks like seeing anywhere from 20 to 25 kids a week, and those sessions are about an hour long each, and I usually allow about 30 minutes drive time between visits. So I'll text people the morning, the evening before and the morning of, make sure the visit still works for them. And then I head out, and I don't necessarily have to take a lot with me. I'm taking snacks and I'm wearing comfortable clothes because I go in lots of places. But beyond that, it's pretty low key.
And so you talked a little bit about this and how like it's based in the home and uses a lot of the materials in the home, but how is the early intervention model different from a traditional therapy approach?
Yeah, so it's actually designed to be really different. So most states use the early intervention model that they use is a family coaching model. So really different than going into a clinic, where the therapist often, the family brings the child, the therapist may bring the child to the back, work with the child, and then bring the child back up and touch base with the parent for a few minutes. This is really entirely different, or it's designed to be that way. Instead of going in and working directly with a child, I am going in and working with the family while the family works with the child. So to make that a little more concrete, what that can look like, let's say that I'm in there because Johnny is not eating well, right? So instead of this being like a feeding clinic where Johnny would come in and sit in a high chair that we provide and try foods that we give and use, tools that we have there. I'm coming into the home. The parent provides the food. The parent provides the seating situation, all of that. And I'm coming in while the parent feeds Johnny to observe and to coach and to give strategies. Now, that can look like maybe there isn't a high chair. So we may be positioning Johnny on a couch in a certain way that makes it easier for him to eat, or sitting on a lap. And maybe that's not the most ideal, but that's what the family has in the moment. We may also look for resources for the family outside of that. Let's say maybe we really do think Johnny needs a high chair. So, many times therapists may be looking at, we may have resource closets or access to resources that we can get for the family. But we're not coming in with our high chair and then leaving with our high chair. So that's one concrete way that it is really different than regular therapy.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a practice area in which the whole family is the client, not just the patient, and
Yeah.
that you have taken off your expert hat as much as possible and are supporting in the family and finding things that work for the family, as opposed to the more traditional medical model. I'm the expert. Let me tell you how you feed a baby.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's very much meeting the family where they are and seeing what tools they have available, what have they already tried, what's working, and then meeting them with strategies that they can use that are reasonable and practical for their family.
Well, you said that this is part of the family coaching model. And so, can you talk us through some of the coaching techniques, how you help, your adult clients and your baby clients change behaviors?
So I would like, and maybe we'll talk about this in a minute. I would like to say that we live in like a ideal world and that every single family is so ready to have us there and to have us soak up all the wonderful suggestions that we have and do all their routines while we watch. And that's another thing I should say is that in EI, we are really trying to embed the strategies within the routines that the family already has. And so we are like, if Johnny's a picky eater, we're going to be working at mealtime. If Johnny doesn't like bath time, we're going to be working at bath time. If we're transitioning from outside, that's what we're going to do while we're there. So with that, we have to come in and kind of figure out where is the family in terms of their readiness or their willingness or their interest in accepting ways to do things a little bit differently. Usually when we're coming in, something has to be different than what's happening. Either we need to try something different, we need to add something to the routine that's not already happening, we need to increase or decrease something, but usually it involves some type of change that the parent needs to make with the child, right? Because the child is not an independent agent at this point that you can just be like, hey, go and practice these stairs 10 times a day. We've got to, the parent has to be involved in that at this age. One of the strategies that I really like is motivational interviewing. If your listeners are not familiar with it or don't remember it from school, it is one of my absolutely favorite techniques, and I totally recommend digging into it further. I could go on and on about it. I will try not to. But the general idea behind motivational interviewing is that I'm really coming in and figuring out what you think about this. So I'm doing that not by asking a lot of questions, not by giving a lot of suggestions, but really creating space and reflecting to you what it is that you think about a situation. So a lot of it looks like reflection. Maybe you say, it's been really hard to feed Johnny because he's so picky. I may just say something to the effect of, yeah, feeding has become really challenging because it feels like Johnny's just not eating very much of what you're offering. So I'm reflecting back to what they're saying, and it gives them space to continue talking. And oftentimes this type of back and forth leads the parent to share more, to know more about what's happened. It also gives the parent an opportunity to, like, if I ask a question, it'll be very intentional. So I may ask a question like, what have you already tried? Because oftentimes this binder of activities, these ideas that I have in my toolbox, they are things that maybe the parent has looked up already. Maybe they've tried some of these things. It can be exhausting to hear somebody give strategies on things that they've already tried over and over. So motivational interviewing is really nice for that, for getting more information, but then also it's nice for seeing those little openings for change, seeing those little moments of like, oh, I could do this a little bit different. So like, for instance, if the parent says something like, well, so if I have reflected, Johnny is not eating much of what you're offering. And maybe the parent then shares, well, I'm really only offering what I know he will eat because, I don't want to waste food. And so maybe then I reflect, Johnny is really only being offered foods that he's already tried. He's not yet being offered foods that you don't think he'll like. And so then there's a little moment there for her to kind of come to the idea on her own, like, maybe I could try something new. Maybe I could. And she kind of comes to this idea on her own versus me telling her to do it. That's one strategy that I definitely pull on. I think through the stages of change, like, is this family really ready? Are they telling us like, yes, I will do anything that you tell me, just let me know? Oftentimes I know this because the parent is sending me videos of what they're trying, and they're texting me and keeping me updated, right? That's a family that I can tell, like, okay, they're ready for some really specific things to try. Oftentimes I'm finding parents who either are pretty ambivalent, like, well, I know this needs to happen, but I'm really busy. I'm just not sure how we're going to be able to work on it. Or occasionally you even have a parent who's pretty resistant and doesn't think anything needs to change. Perhaps the referral came into early intervention through a pediatrician or another person in the child's life, and the parent doesn't share the same concern. You really need to notice where that parent is, because it's going to dictate kind of how you meet them and the strategies that you give in order to support them. I always ask permission. And so oftentimes when I'm coaching, I am physically coaching. So let's take the example of a baby who has really low muscle tone and we're trying to work on sitting independently. I need that parent to know how to use their hands and know how to support that baby for stability. And so I need them to do it. It doesn't really matter if I can do it and then I leave and they're not doing it, right? So I'll literally ask permission. Is it okay if I touch your arm and show you how to do this? But I'll also ask permission in other times, like say the parent is feeding the baby a bottle. Baby's losing a lot of fluid, maybe baby's choking, right? I may ask permission in that moment. Would it be okay if I feed him for a moment and just get a feel for what's happening? Or is it okay if I hold the body, or is it bottle? Or is it okay if I kind of move your arm up a little bit so that baby is sitting up a little more? So I'll ask permission like that. And then I'll also ask permission for sharing ideas. Like, would it be okay for me to share some of the things that I'm wondering about or I'm thinking? It's kind of a subtle thing, but it does give parents a little bit of control and a feeling of like, I have a say in this. This isn't just somebody who's coming and dumping all over me, but I get to be a participant here. And then I also invite parents into experiences. So what do I mean by that? So one of the things that can happen pretty often is a parent can think you're really just there to be the therapist. That's what you do. You come in and you're the therapist. You're the one playing with the child. I had one parent say, when I knocked on the door, I heard someone say, the baby trainer's here, which was really funny. Not really what we're supposed to be. We're not really supposed to be the baby trainer in this model. We're really supposed to be working with the whole family. And so oftentimes I'll be on the floor and I'll be doing something, and a parent may be on the couch and looking at their phone or otherwise unengaged in something. And so I'll invite them into what's happening. Sometimes my little trick for that will be like, "Hey, mama, come play." So I'll talk for the child, or I may say like, "Hey, mama, look what I can do," or I may just be more direct and say, "Okay, you come and give it a try. You're going to get far better results than I am. So why don't you give it a try? He's going to have more fun." But I definitely invite them into it. So that's a lot, but that's just a few of the tools that I use.
So it sounds like even though you have your OT hat on, like you're an OT working in early intervention, you're using a lot of like the coaching tools. So the ones at the beginning, you were really talking a lot about the stages of change, also known as the trans-theoretical model, kind of finding where people were at and meeting them there. And then when you did move to intervention, it sounded like you were using motivational interviewing to ask open-ended questions, understand where people were at, and then like reflect back to them to help them kind of move towards behavior change. And then when you did have to, use your OT skill or OT knowledge, that you did it using like a permission-based way where you asked permission and then you also like invited the parent into the experience. And I think that's one of the hardest things too, is because there's such a, like, people feel like the therapist should come and then like the parent gets to go away, but it's just like a different model. So, can you share a story about a session where the family coaching model really made a difference?
I work a lot with autism and early autism, and something that I hear from a lot of parents is that they just find it really hard to connect with their child. Not because they don't love their child, not because they don't feel like their child loves them, but it just feels so hard to share their child's world. And so being able to teach families strategies that help them connect. I had one dad that I worked with who the mother and the child felt very connected, but he felt very left out of that situation, and he just didn't have a way to connect with her, was his words. And so we worked specifically on tangible strategies he could use to share her experience. And by the end of our time together, he told me in tears that he felt connected. And really at the end of the day, all the milestones, like you can work on milestones all day long, but at the end of the day, what really matters to human experience is relationship. And so for that family, it was really, really powerful. It required vulnerability on his part. Hard. He had to be willing to let me watch him play and to change what it was that he was doing and be open to doing some things differently. And he was. And so that's when it worked really well. But I will tell you, not everybody is is ready to be that vulnerable or capable of being that vulnerable. And so, it's definitely a two-way street. And so he did as much work, if not more, than what.
Well, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing. And so, I would love to think that every session is sunshine and rainbows. Can you tell me some of the challenges around using a coaching approach in early intervention?
Yeah, I have kind of some nuanced, maybe even unorthodox views, perhaps, around some of what we do, and primarily because I think the theory behind early intervention and family coaching is beautiful, and I wholeheartedly support it. I think it becomes challenging when we think of it as a one size fits all approach for children 0 to 3 with developmental delays and disabilities. And the reason that I find it challenging is that there are more parents than I could tell you about who are just simply overwhelmed. They may be parenting alone, or they may be parenting on alternate schedules. And so maybe one is working at night, one's working during the day. They have multiple children. They have a lot on their plate. And so the idea behind early intervention is that we are giving parents strategies that then they use consistently and frequently throughout their time with their children. And theoretically, that should work. It's like, well, they only have dinner time with their family as a whole, but they could do it during dinner. Well, yes, but they're also exhausted. And, the AC went out, and this one needs a bath, and the mother in law is calling, and just life is life. And so I find it hard to ignore sometimes the need for direct intervention for children who do not have access to, maybe they're in rural areas and they don't have access to other outpatient therapy options or home health therapy options. Um, or children who are really significantly physically disabled or medically complex, I think it becomes challenging. It's not that we can't support. I think early intervention can absolutely support families in these circumstances, but I also think that direct intervention is also appropriate. And OTs and PTs and speech therapists go to school for years to become skilled at what we do. And it requires a certain level of skill to be able to effectively provide that intervention. And parents can be taught some things, but of course, they're not going to be able to become the therapist. And so I find that really challenging. I also sometimes, can find it challenging if a parent, perhaps the child would do really well theoretically with the coaching model. Maybe there's a language delay or a little bit of a play delay, a motor delay, something that could easily be worked on in the context of routines. Maybe we see the child at daycare, and that's the only time we can see the child because the parent works. Well, the daycare provider, we can talk to her sometimes, but almost always somebody's got a dirty diaper, somebody's hitting somebody else, and it's time to go outside. Like there's a million things happening. So trying to gain a daycare provider's one-on-one attention, even briefly, is super challenging. It's not impossible, but it just is a challenge. It's something to be aware of. Sometimes a parent is at home, but just not engaged. They are not interested in this model. So that happens as well. And then I would say the other thing that can happen is that there's a mismatch between what the medical model thinks that we do and what we actually do. So a child may have developmental needs and they say this child needs to be seen by early intervention, but our goals are not developmental in terms of reaching specific milestones. Our model, our family participation goals. So we may still be working on milestones like walking and, using utensils and doing all those things, but we're doing them in the context of a routine, like a meal or walking upstairs to bedtime or something like that. And so we're not going to be able to say he's using a fork this many times at this many meals in this many months, right? And so sometimes there's a mismatch between what parents say is getting worked on and what doctors are telling parents need to be worked on. And so I find those are some of the challenges. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that's one of the nice things about having the coaching skills as a coach, but then also having your OT hat that you could put on. Like it's just multiple tools in your toolbox, and it helps you to better like pull out the right tool at the right time. Because like if you're working on feeding and suctioning, you can't motivational interviewing and be like, so tell me how you think this, section works.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, what resources would you recommend for therapists who want to learn more about family coaching or early intervention?
Thought about this, and I have too many. So I'm gonna do a couple of specific and then some broad sweeps. So my specific is I really really love the book Child of Mine, and it's written by Ellen Satter, Ellyn Satter. I just really love it as a introductory approach to eating as babies and toddlers. It takes kind of some of the pressure off of this mystery of eating. So I really like that book a lot. I also think the 0 to 3 website has a lot of really great resources and can point you in a lot of really great directions. But beyond that, my library is way too full. I have read so much, and I would totally encourage somebody who is interested in working with children and families to really broaden your knowledge in a lot of areas. I would look at what does the evidence say about mental health and well-being and psychological intervention, not so that you can be a psychologist, but so that you have some tools or some frames of thinking when you're interacting with people. I would suggest that you get a really solid knowledge of how children develop, but not just here in America. I would really encourage looking at child development and how people raise children from a global perspective, because we are, what do they say? We're like fish in water. The water is our way of raising children and the way we think about child development. We are so entrenched in it that we automatically think the way we think about it is true with a capital T. But it's not, because humans have been around for however long and have evolved to still be here today. So we clearly have been able to raise children and get them to procreate, and without having a certain play gym and without having to do everything by an exact certain age. So I would encourage getting a broader look at child development. I would look at what other disciplines are doing. So what are PTs doing? What are OTs doing? What are speech therapists doing? Learning from cross disciplines. But anyway, those are my biggies.
One common question that I see a lot is about new grads. Do you think that new grads could be successful in early intervention?
New grads are excited and fresh and ready to learn. Man, I just think that's so awesome. And I absolutely think that with the right support and mentorship and willingness to learn and acknowledging and accepting that you're going to make mistakes, that's okay. It's just part of the process of anywhere that you start working, that you're going to be okay. I do think mentorship and support are going to make everything a lot better, but I absolutely think new grads can make it anyway.
I could definitely hear your passion for early intervention. And I know you've definitely given me lots of good parenting tips. So I know all the families that you get to work with are so lucky. But where can people learn more about you and the work that you do?
Okay, so I am at hellojoyot.com. That's my website. And you can find me at Katie at hellojoyot.com.
That sounds great. And is there anything else you want to share before we close?
I don't think so, but I'm just grateful for you and for, you sharing other people's stories. I think it's a really great opportunity for people to listen and learn more about what we're doing. Thanks for having me on.
That's all for this episode of the Health Coach OT, evidence-based coaching for chronic disease. Thank you for joining me today, and a huge thank you to Katie from Hello Joy OT for sharing her expertise and passion for early intervention. If you're ready to expand your OT practice with evidence-based coaching skills, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It helps other therapists find the show. Ready to take the next steps? Visit healthcoachot.com to join our newsletter for weekly evidence-based coaching tips and get early access when our certification programs launch. Keep expanding what's possible in your practice, and I'll see you next week.